Welcome to the webinar How to Get Everybody on the Same Page Using Storytelling. My name is Hoyte Polkamp. I'm a business developer at Info and I will be your host for today. We are super excited to be hosting this webinar, so let's get into it. We have a very special guest with us today, but first a few words about Info. As digital innovation partner, we aim to improve people's lives by creating meaningful products, services and partnerships. In this, we take a holistic approach to development and want to understand what a business needs today, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow in order to provide end customers with the most optimal experience. If you're interested to learn more about our services, I encourage you to have a look on our website. And before I introduce our guests of today, a few quick announcements. As you can see in the screen, we have chat functionality enabled. Feel free to use this chat functionality to ask your questions, and after the webinar we will have enough time to answer your questions. Also, the presentation that our guest is going to be doing today will be recorded, so you'll have a moment to look it back afterwards. And after the webinar, you will all receive an email with the link to this recording. Now, on to our guest of today and the topic of this webinar. An often overlooked but ever so crucial topic in successfully launching a digital product or service is ensuring everybody is fully aligned. Our guest today is Info's very own service designer and business consultant, Bas Barten. Bas has worked for the government, for the aviation industry and in the financial sector and has vast experience aligning stakeholders to develop digital products. He's been applying storytelling as a powerful alignment tool throughout and will share his insights with you today. Bas will not only show how to apply storytelling in a business context, but will also give practical advice which situations lend itself to use storytelling and how they can contribute to alignment within your organization. And as a last reminder, feel free to ask questions, and I would hereby like to pass it on to Bas.
Thank you, Hoyte. My name is Bas. I'm a service designer here at Info. And in the next half hour, I will argue that storytelling is a powerful tool when aligning people when you want to change your business. First, I will discuss the importance of alignment. Then, what storytelling is in a business context. And finally, I will give do's and don'ts when applying storytelling at work. But first, let's go back in time. In 2017, a team of researchers went into caves on the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia. And there they saw this image on one of the walls. It's a hunting scene. On the left you see small mythological figures attacking a gazelle-like creature on the right. The researchers dated the scene using modern dating techniques, and they found out that it was created at least 40,000 years ago. It's the earliest example of storytelling that we know, and it shows that all cultures, even ancient ones, have told stories. In his book Sapiens, the writer Yuval Noah Harari argues that stories were important to allow large groups of people to cooperate together. For example, two Catholic knights going on a crusade without having ever met. They can still do that because of their shared beliefs, their shared religion. That implies that you can also change the way people cooperate by telling different stories. Let's go back to the present and meet Vera. She's 35 years old and she's a manager operations at a bike rental organization. She's aware of a recurring problem in their process. When something happens to a bike during a ride, for example a flat tire, customers don't know what to do. There's no central point of information in that case, and the process to return a defect bike is cumbersome. She has a great idea how digital solutions can help to resolve these problems. But Vera is hesitating to pick up this challenge. She tried introducing changes in her organization before, but last time she did that, it failed. She managed to get approval from her bosses, but the initiative didn't get momentum in the organization, and in the end, it just died down. From experience, Vera knows that introducing a new software solution is only part of the needed change. Besides that, the data that you store, the way that people work, the processes, and how your teams are trained and organized also have to change. And all that change needs to be aligned in order to be successful. On her last project, Vera found out that achieving this change is notoriously difficult. For one part, that is because most organizations are built for reliability and not for adaptability. And that attitude is very healthy when you're just running your business. But it stands in the way when you want to change the business. Vera is not alone in this observation. In a survey of 500 senior executives of large companies, cultural attitudes is listed as the #1 barrier for implementing change. And if that isn't enough, communicating ideas is difficult. There are all sorts of communication barriers. Think of different communication styles that people have. And also think of the perspective of the receiver of the communication. Maybe they have different prior knowledge or they miss some information. And also the channel that you use to communicate can be a barrier. For example, having to use remote video in these COVID times. In a survey by The Economist Intelligence Unit, 44% of respondents say that miscommunication has caused delay or failure to complete a project. And this is where storytelling can help Vera. But first I want to clear something up. Most of the storytelling that we know in a business context is about marketing. And although that has created some great stories like this one from Centraal Beheer, that is not the focus of the story of Vera and me today. The focus is on applying storytelling in your organization. We can learn one thing from marketeers though. Stories are powerful because they combine ratio with emotion. They allow people to relate to your idea. Storytelling can help to align all aspects of a change. Vera could use storytelling to give insight and align on the current situation. It can also help to envision a future state. What that might mean for processes, for data, for teams and for software. But most important, storytelling can help to get everybody on board with a new idea, both management and operations. It gives everybody a clear direction to work towards when implementing the idea. So let's go back to Vera. She's tired about worrying about all the things that could go wrong with her idea. At home she crashes on the couch, next to her 2-year-old daughter. They watch Peppa Pig on TV. And Daddy Pig tells Peppa a bedtime story. But Peppa doesn't like how the story unfolds. They don't live in a house, Dad. They live in a castle. And Daddy Pig changes the story accordingly. And that sparks an idea with Vera. Could creating a story together be her solution? The next day at work, Vera enthusiastically explains to her boss how co-creating a story could help. Look, if we gather a team and together create a story of how this idea might work, we might be able to get everybody on board, Vera says. But Vera, her boss replies, that sounds kind of scary. The idea might be changed in an unknown direction, or they might challenge every aspect of it. You know how critical everybody is over here. No, this is good, Vera replies. Creating the story together can be the first validation of the idea. and her boss gives Vera the benefit of the doubt to go ahead and assemble a team. Vera's intuition to co-create a story is backed by some research. Organizations that successfully implement strategic change more often let designers of that change collaborate with the ones that have to execute it. So, telling a story is only part of the power, and creating or refining a story together is the other part. Vera gets to work assembling her team. Who should be in it? She remembers a lesson she learned from a colleague, and that is to include critics. That colleague has checked a business idea he had with some enthusiastic bike repair mechanics, and they approved of the idea. He was confident in presenting it to the entire team. But halfway during his presentation, he was interrupted. An employee stood up and rejected the idea. Others joined the critic, saying things like, "Yeah, we already tried that, and that doesn't work here." And this small group overvoiced the silent majority that might have liked the idea. The lesson that her colleague learned is to also include critics when you're validating an idea, to get them on board. Vera and her team have gathered for their first session, and Vera starts by asking, who is the story going to be about? Every story has a leading character. Think of Simba in The Lion King. And most of the times that leading character has some friends. Think of Timon and Pumbaa. In the design world, we use the term personas for the leading characters and friends. Vera's team has decided that the customer will be their leading character and the employee will be the close friend. Next, Vera asks the team to gather facts about the customer. They use research that the company previously did, like the bike preferences. They add that information to the character, to create some depth and to make the character come alive. Next, the team discusses if the story will be about now or about the future. The team could start with creating a story about the current state, identifying where the problems and the opportunities are. Or they could create a story about the future. And this is something tech companies do when they're exploring new technologies. Creating a story how people will interact with new tech. Like for example the HoloLens. This allows them to see future pain points and opportunities for improvements that they otherwise wouldn't have discovered. Vera's team already has a clear view of the problem, so they decide to mainly focus on the future state. They do start with telling a little bit about the current state, to show the struggle of the customer and the need for this change. Vera asked the team to think of the goals that the leading character has. In the design world, we sometimes use the word jobs to be done. A job to be done is a task a customer tries to perform or a problem that they try to solve. But there's a difference between jobs to be done and the goals of a story character. A job to be done is mostly something rational, and a goal of a story character adds to the depth of the character itself. The team first comes up with the following goal. The customer wants to rent a bike to get somewhere. Vera is not satisfied. That doesn't sound really interesting, does it? What if our main character has a job interview and needs to get there on time, says Vera. The way Vera formulates the goal allows listeners to the story to empathize. The team adds, yeah, and then the employee can save the day by helping her when her bike breaks down. A week later, we check in with the team. They are together again working on the story. And there are many ways of creating a story. And a technique Pixar Animation Studio uses is called story beats. Story beats are the most important moments in your story. Vera and the team start with writing down these story beats on index cards and ordering them. And by doing that, they create a simple backbone for their story. It goes like this. The customer rents the bike. She hops on the bike towards the job interview. Almost at the job interview, the bike gets a flat tire. She doesn't know what to do, and in stress calls customer service. The customer service employee can see all information about the customer and the position of the bike on a map. He calls the customer by telling she can walk the remaining part to the job interview. And meanwhile, he sends a repair mechanic to fix the broken bike. There are also many ways of telling a story. For example, in the form of a fictional newspaper article about the improvement that the team made and the success it is. Or you could argue that a customer journey map is also a way of telling a story. Vera is aware of the power of visuals. Humans are far better at remembering images than they are at remembering words. Do you remember the cave drawings from the start of my talk? Visuals were one of the first things that people used for communicating, besides just talking. So the team starts to work on converting the story beats to a storyboard. They draw the scene for each key moment in the story and put it in order on the wall. Another week later, we check in with the team again. But this time, they are struggling. The deadline of presenting their ideas is next week. First they made good progress, but now they are stuck. Vera oversees the storyboard. It has grown substantially. Team members are having discussions about specific details. That image of the interface of the employee, that is not correct. And how do we get the system to automatically show the customer profile and that GPS data? Where does it come from? Vera has a coffee chat with her boss. She tells her about the problems that the team face. Her boss says, "Vera, did you watch the latest Spider-Man movie?" Vera replies, Yeah, I did." "How often did you see Spider-Man going to the loo in that movie?" "Probably 0 times." "If it's not important for the storyline, then it's not filmed." So what is the main thing that you want people to remember? Focus on that. And with this lesson, Vera goes back to the team. She creates a later parking lot, and together they move parts of the story that are not relevant for now but are maybe interesting for later over there. A week later, it is presentation time. The team has fine-tuned the story and it's Vera's role to present it to employees and management. After Vera is done, there are some questions, but everybody is visibly enthusiastic about the idea. And the team gets approval from management and, very important, the trust from the employees to go ahead. But this is only the start. First, Vera doesn't want the initiative to die down. To keep it alive, the team creates a room where employees can just walk in and view the storyboard and add their notes and their ideas. Or in remote times, you could create something online with the same goal. So what's next for Vera? A good question to ask comes from business professor Roger Martin. What would have to be true to make this future state a reality? Answering this question generates a list of assumptions. By creating a story together, Vera already did the first validation of her idea. Now it's time to think of ways to validate the most important assumptions. For example, that GPS data from the bike is available to the customer service employee, or that the customer will indeed call the service desk when they have a flat tire. The team can build something, measure the effect, and learn from it, getting more and more confident in small steps about the idea. After she has successfully told the story, Vera feels like the queen of storytelling at her company. She takes time to write down her learnings. Although changing organizations is hard, it can be done. And storytelling is a great tool to kick it off and start the change, especially when you create a story together. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Bas, for the presentation. Very great insights in your presentation, and of course, as a bike aficionado myself, great to see a presentation on bikes, involving bikes at least, and also really excited to see that I learned something new, that I was not aware that the oldest wall paintings are actually in Sulawesi, a place I visited quite a long time ago, but some great stuff. Really nice. We received some interesting questions from our audience that we're happy to go over right now. But first of all, I also myself had a question actually that I would like to pose. So Vera was trying to get her company excited for a change in an existing business, right? So how would you approach, how would the approach differ if she wanted to align the company for a totally new project or product?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that fundamentally you could use the same approach, but one thing that I would change is that when you're creating a story based on an already existing process, you have a lot of information you could already quickly use to form your story about. You can look at where pain points are, and you already have people available to cooperate with you and give you insights for your story. But when you're starting on something really new, then I would say that at first you probably want to create a story that's a bit more high level, and also the goal of that story will probably be more getting your idea sold to management or maybe to investors, and not, as we saw in the presentation that I told, to get employees on board and make them, because in this situation there are no employees yet.
Yes.
But still, I think it's especially when you're working with new technology and you're creating something entirely new, it can be a great way to already as I told in my example, that like companies like Microsoft and Google do, that whenever they envision a new technology, they also create a story around it to show how it could work, and that also allows them to validate things. But so I think I would keep it a little bit more high level at first, depending on your goal, and then maybe in a second step, when you have also done maybe some more market research about your idea, then create a second story that is more in depth. So that would be my approach.
Your approach, cool. Great, thanks. Let's go on to another question. What would be a situation where you would advise to absolutely not apply storytelling to create alignment or to get everybody on the same page within an organization? I don't know of any situation where you could not apply it, but I think there is a line. An important thing though is that the effort you put into storytelling really differs depending on the situation. So if you have a very small thing that you want to change, then it doesn't make sense to spend 4 to 6 weeks on it to create a great story about it, because you probably it doesn't require that much change in the business, and it doesn't require that much
investment probably, so you need less time getting people on board. So I do from personal experience. One times I had the situation where we created the story and I was worrying a little bit that it became too big for the goal that it was trying to achieve.
Yeah.
I think that is also something that Vera experiences. That's a bit based on my personal experience as well. What Vera has in her story, that at one point in time the story becomes really, really big with a lot of steps in it, and not only I think that it doesn't make the story less powerful, it's also you have to still look it into perspective of the goal that you're trying to achieve with the story. So it can be that that it becomes too big. But otherwise, I would say that, and also the form that I talked about mainly in the talk is about using storyboarding and visual imagery to tell your story basically. But as I also said, like a simple story in the form of a fictional newspaper article about how this change is going to be a success for the company. That's something you could write in half a day, and then you still have a great story that you can use. So I think it has to be in balance with the effort for creating a story has to be in balance with what you want to do.
You need to tailor it to what kind of goal you want to achieve.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. Good. Let me see. A few questions from the audience. Anna actually has a question. Can you describe a project you've worked on yourself where you've applied storytelling to enable alignment? Yeah,
I can. Unfortunately, I can't name the names of the company, but I think it is. I worked for a large aviation company where I applied storytelling, and there it had the goal to change the way of working of the employees, there we sort of co-created together with the employees and created a story about their future workday. So we started with the moment that they woke up and got to work till the moment that their shift was over and they were at home, and some things that they experienced in between that were really important to them, and how some digital improvements could help that. So that was a track that we did for the company, and I did several of those kind of tracks, and I learned a lot from it. And actually, I think one of the moment in my story that Vera is getting advice from her colleague, I think, or remembers advice from her colleague where the colleague told a story and forgot to include critics. That's actually my personal experience from that project.
Right.
Because I was there on stage, so I had the goal of, or I had the job of presenting the story to a large group, I think of 70 employees, and it was really time stressed, the project, and the work that they were doing was also really, they were all understaffed. So they couldn't make a lot of people available for working on this co-creation.
That's why you weren't able to include the critics, maybe.
Well, but that could have been, I think, one of the reasons. But indeed, we were with a small group, and they I think they asked around at the organization. They said like, who's interested in doing this? And then they were like, I'm interested in it. And those people then joined, and I think we had a team of 4 that worked on the story, and they were really enthusiastic about it. But it wasn't like a balanced representation of the entire employees. But I didn't know that until I stood there in front of the audience.
Maybe you can sort of conclude from this that it will take a bit more effort to get your critics on board. As opposed to the people that are already mostly on board with the story.
Because there's also, I wouldn't say that if you have somebody where you know, like, okay, this person is not going to change, and they then don't invest in that, I would say, because that would make it. I think, but if you have something that's like critic, but is willing to change his attitude. Then I would definitely consider. In my case, I was external, so would chat with management. They know like who in the company is critical, but is like still willing to think with you, and ask like, what do you think is a good group of people that we can include? Yeah. So that was a lesson that I learned there.
Yeah.
And in the end, I did some tracks there for another group of employees that really helped to kickstart the change that they wanted to implement. That was give a really positive vibe, and everybody was enthusiastic about the idea, and it grew bigger. Yeah. So
nice.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Let's go on to another question from our audience. Peter de Waard is actually curious to learn, what was your biggest learning using storytelling?
Well, I think there are multiple learnings. I would say that are my biggest learnings that also had a place in the story that I just told. And I think one of them I just mentioned, the include the critics. Another one I also mentioned, like really important not to let it grow too big, and see if you can have a convincing story still. Yeah. And it also needs to be balanced with what you're trying to achieve. That's an important one. And I do like one thing that I found really valuable was to make it a really open process where we were able to create a room in the company where we could where we worked, but when we weren't there, it was just open, and the storyboard was on the wall. Yeah. And also like some for goals for everyone to see, and also the goals that we came up with were on the wall. Yeah. And we created some personas, like the characters, and all the characters were also there. And we on purpose we did that so that people could walk in and just have a look at it, and we hoped at least that it would help to make the initiative not be something from an ivory tower, but something that's very close to you and very approachable. Yeah. And that you could provide input to if you wanted to. So that was, I think, also something that worked really well in that case. So I would definitely see that as one of my learnings there. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And also, one last thing I remember is that one thing that is important, that after you're done creating the story, it can be very tempting to see it as a step that is done, and then you move on to the next. But what will definitely happen after you've created a story is that new insights come in, and your idea starts to change in more detail. And when you're making decisions about what you're going to implement, for instance, or what you're going to test, then you also get new input, and your story will probably change.
Evolve all the time.
It will evolve, yeah. And I think that it's could be valuable to, if you're using this story as a North Star within your whole implementation project, like when even like your software developers or your employees that need to be trained can still look towards like, okay, this is what we're trying to do. Then it's important to keep the story up to date,
alive.
Alive and up to date, because I think in projects that I did, we didn't focus enough on that, and it became like this one thing that was really great, but it didn't have value for the track after that.
Later on in the process.
So later on in the process. But I think that it can be still really valuable to use it later on in the process, especially when you're working in an agile Scrum setting. I think that one of the things that makes an agile team work is that you have a clear North Star, and that this kind of story can be that North Star. So that would also be like a last learning to keep it up to date. You have to put in some effort. That you have to be willing to put in some effort.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's interesting to see that you can use a story as a North Star as well. I think that that's also valuable. Another question we received from our audience was, who would you choose to co-create? You partially touched on it on the questions we just went over. Also explaining that a location, like a physical location for storytelling, to work on with a team on the story, is actually accessible to everyone within the company. Do you have any additions to that?
Well, I think that first, like with regards to tools in these COVID times, that's been really challenging for something like this, because especially the co-creation part, it's a lot more difficult when you're online. But I think you could still use it. You could use like online whiteboards. I think that we're all aware of that. Yeah. Sort of resort to that in these, so that you could use that. But I would prefer that you at least you meet up once in a while as a team in real life and just have a room where you can chat and share your ideas and create it together. Yeah. And it does help with like the visualization of it, that you just draw, and I think that's a misconception, that a lot of people think that they can't draw, right? And they're really hesitant, like it doesn't look like anything. Yeah. But you could. There are techniques, like I think, for example, some icebreaker technique that you could use is that you just scribble something on a paper, and the other person has to finish that scribble by adding a nose to it and adding. So then you already create a character. So it's an example of how. Even without any knowledge, you could still draw something, or with even like small stick figures, you could still draw. And I like personally like that, because it makes things come alive more than just words. And one thing so that's a tool that I would like to incorporate. And also, if you're not the best drawer in the world, I am not, definitely not. No. So
I didn't understand you. Some of the drawings you did.
But those are but that indeed. So then you still just apply it and just use that. Cool. And in your storytelling, at least, yeah. And you can also use. I think for one of the projects we used photography instead of images, like drawings. Then you in your creation phase, you can still use the drawings. But if you want to like say, okay, the drawings are not qualitative enough to share with the larger audience, if you don't feel confident about that, you could use photography, and preferably not stock photography, but just going out there to your actual business, to the work floor, and just taking pictures, finding somebody that's good in taking pictures, and create some images that represent, and preferably also with some employees on that image that people can know and can recognize. Like that indeed that we did that once, and it really helped. Like people say like, oh, there's Henk on there, and that's a cool one, and so something like that really helps. Yeah.
And nowadays everybody can take pictures. So if you
that's
right?
true. Yeah, but it does take some work to make a composition that looks good and that like tells your idea. But I think you can do that indeed. Yeah. But with regards to online tools, I would
that's
indeed
say actually also a question by Emily. If she's curious to learn what kind of tooling you would advise, but go on.
Well, I think tooling is more. You mean like online tooling, or because I think tooling is more in general. That can be anything from just paper and drawing and that sort of things. But with regards to online tooling, to be honest, personally, I don't have a lot of experience with storytelling purely online. I know that there are online tools for creating storyboards. And
such as?
I have to look that up.
Okay.
I know I have to look that up, but there are some like software as a service for creating storyboards. But I would say that in the preparation of the story that I just told, I also created a storyboard in an online whiteboarding tool. Yeah. So I just use that, and that's also fine. But I think
do you know that? What's the name?
Well, I use Miro.
Miro. Okay.
Yeah. But you could use any tool that. And we it did help to. Like in an early process with some of my colleagues, I asked them, like, could you go through it with me? And we went through the storyboard online with Teams. I shared it and I went through it, and that worked. And they gave feedback on it, and it was there. Also, the link was there for them to later add some more remarks about what I could change on the story that I was going to tell. So that's what I used recently. Yeah. But with regards to online tooling. I personally prefer to do it live in this case, and just work with pen and paper and whiteboards.
Get the direct feedback from the team. I guess. Yeah, great. Cool. Let's see. I actually have 2 more questions. One is by our colleague, Paul van Putten. He's curious to learn any ideas on how to use storytelling later on in the process. So during an Agile Scrum project, for instance. We touched on it briefly, I think, on keeping the story alive, right? And continuing to reevaluate it throughout the project, or so.
Well, indeed, I would say that during your sprints, you could indeed create a fixed heartbeat where, I don't know, every 2 or 3 sprints you go back to the story and think, are we still in line with the story, or is the story still in line with what we're trying to achieve? And do it in that way. But I see the question that maybe what he also means is that storytelling, you can use it in a smaller way, maybe within your sprint. Or I do know that for instance, the original idea of user stories are also basically are really about telling a story. I think that nowadays that has converted a lot to just being written requirements. Only we call them user stories, but the original idea is that you indeed have a picture in your head about the person that the user story is about and what he's trying to achieve and so on. So there you if you have the room and time, you could spice up those stories by adding some more background and detail and linking it to your the story that you first told when you started the change. So that will be something where you could use it. And
how is that going to help in the process?
Well, I've seen in the past that it's really difficult for development teams to understand the change that has to happen or the functionality that has to be built. And when you create something that helps them empathize with the situation of the user, I do think that creates like better software in the end and makes the process more smooth. So that's what I would think. And I do think that in the process about storytelling, you could use it for maybe for user research as well. But that's more that you when you're doing user research, you want to present users. You sometimes create like a prototype of something. But earlier on in the project where you don't have a prototype yet, you could create a small story that you can quickly tell to some test users to validate your idea. And I think that's also a place where you could apply storytelling to make something come alive for them and also draw something so that they can give better feedback. I think that's all. The application there is really about creating shared understanding and
Nice.
Okay. Yeah.
Great. That's a good answer. Thank you very much. Let's see. Let's go over 2 last final questions. Okay. So next question is from Richard Reimers. Is there a correlation between user journeys and story beats? In other words, can they be used in conjunction?
I think the user journeys it's probably the customer journey, or I would assume that it's it's at least the term we use is customer journey. Yes. But it can also be an employee journey. So I would say that then the user journey is the right word. Well, I think there's an overlap between I would say that the customer journey or the employee journey that you create focuses on a part of the storyline that you told and the story beats. I don't think that one story beat is going to be one customer journey. It probably will be multiple moments in your story you want to focus on when you go into depth, and there you create a customer journey out of it, or an employee journey.
Great, thank you very much. So final question, actually also from one of our colleagues, is from Martijn. If you involve critics, how can you avoid that they are not willing to cooperate to the story in sessions and might slow down the storytelling process?
That's a tricky one. Yeah, I did already answer it a little bit, that I would say that there's a group of critics that you can include, but they will indeed not benefit the process. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that you should include those. I think you should, there's like this continuum, and you should go a little bit more towards people that are critical but are willing to change their attitudes. If you're able to find those, that will be good. And then you indeed should talk to management or to other people that know about the company that you're working, or if you're external. But if you're working there yourself, I think you can pinpoint those people yourself. Yeah. And I would say that some things if I are assembling a team to do a co-creation session, and I have this feeling like, okay, I can include this person, but I'm hesitating because it will cause more effort, or it's not as I know he's going to be critical, then that's a trigger for me to think like, oh, maybe I should include him, and step out of my comfort zone and just should include him.
So it always poses kind of a risk.
Definitely. But in the end, like what you want to do with your storytelling, and also with the steps you do after that, is minimizing risk. So like keeping risk out until the latest moment, that's the worst thing that you can do. So I think that indeed introducing a little bit of risk that you can manage by introducing somebody that's critical early in the process is actually super valuable. Great.
So maybe not you can choose as a critic a grumpy cat, but maybe not the most grumpy cat.
No, definitely not. No, I don't think you should include grumpy cat, but somebody that is critical, but still is willing to change his attitude. Yeah.
Great, cool. Thank you very much, Bas.
Thank you.
And that just about wraps it up for our webinar for today. So thank you very much for your attention, and if you are experiencing similar challenges within getting your company aligned, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Bas or myself, and we're happy to have a sit down for a cup of coffee, see how we can how we can support you or help you with your challenges. And please also don't forget that you will receive a link to rewatch the webinar via email. As well as a download link to the white paper that we've drafted and put together on the actual topic of alignment. So for now, I'd like to thank you for your attention today. And Bas, thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
And we look forward to seeing you on our next event. And please have a great day. Thank you very much.